So who is?
Who is going to do it? Well, then I guess he's going to have to find another job.
I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, because of my involvement with some of the other things that I do, I am incident command certified in 100, 700, and 800 of the FEMA process for emergency response. So when he tells me that that he doesn't have to perform under the ICS standard, you're blowing smoke up the wrong guy's shorts. Because that ain't so. I got a little piece of paper from him that says so.
By the way, it seems to me the only plan that's worth a damn is the one they have at the plant, which is you have to hear the starting gun, you got to slide that oxygen on, and go. If you're going to wait for someone to come get you, if there's a catastrophe, and like you said, that highly toxic hydrogen sulfide is blowing out on a no-win day, I would, man, slap up against that thing. If they install a normal FEMA plan or emergency plan where they send the fire department guys in their hazmat suits, they're just going to be calling back, you know, the number of body bags they're going to need. I think that plan that they have at the plant, which by the way, the employees, all 4 of them told me, is only because OSHA requires it.
That's because they were fined for not having it.
Right, and to me, once your hand has been slapped once, and especially in an industry that's sort of on the pioneering gauge, they're given a lot of latitude and they bend a lot of rules. I've been close enough to companies like that to see it. I was with Westinghouse when they wanted to build floating nuclear power plants and other things. But shortcuts are taken, and if you expect business to sacrifice profits for their personal ethical morals, I think you're just mistaken about how this is going to work. But the question I wanted to ask was about the professor you mentioned from UH. Because if I'm not mistaken, it must have been that guy speaking at Leilani. No, because that guy sounded like someone very proud of his personal baby.
Well, he was Harry Olsen's grad student.
Okay.
Don Thomas was
responsibility.
Yeah, Don Thomas was working on his doctorate under Harry Olsen.
Okay.
So Harry Olsen had the guy by the short hairs. I mean, he's one of these guys, I can actually feel some sympathy for him, because he had to go along, or he never would have gotten his PhD.
What I wanted to ask you, though, in your research, did you find out, because he mentioned at that meeting that there had been other people who were saying that this place was not geologically right. He didn't elaborate. He didn't say it was because of lack of resources or steam. It could have been because of the situation, especially on the East Rift Zone, of it being unstable. So I would be interested to know who those other voices that were raised against him, because that guy that spoke was basically saying, yeah, everyone said it couldn't be done, and now look, I got the hottest well on earth.
Well, I mean, you've got the hottest little hot spot, and that is exactly true because of the uniqueness of Hawaii. Hawaii sits on a hot spot.
Well, I understand that. That's how all the islands are formed. That hot spot is what creates the island.
One of 6 in the world.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I know of no other place where they are doing geothermal on a hot spot. Almost all geothermal that is being done in the world is done on areas of plate interaction, plate tectonics, right? Where you have 2 massive plates pushing against each other. The pressure will literally melt the rock. It creates heat. And that pressure is unrelenting. And the heat just doesn't go away due to the pressure. Again, we get back to the rift zone. See, this is not a fault zone. This is a rift zone. All of the heat comes from Kilauea. What they are sucking off of is probably left over from the 60 eruption. There is no resupply unless there is another eruption down the fault zone. There's no more than what they've got, and that's why it's cooling off. I mean, there are geothermal plants in the world that have been running for 100 years in places like Italy, Greece, you know, they've been using geothermal for a very long time. And for other things than generating electricity, yes.
Does the success of the people that are against geothermal depend on who gets elected mayor and if we get the feds involved?
Well, I mean, I can be ambivalent about who gets elected mayor. Actually, the fact that Billy vetoed that allows us to turn to the Environmental Justice Division or the EPA and go, they clearly are not going to protect us, and therefore it becomes, the county is not going to protect us, the state is not going to protect us, and it now becomes your job under the law. Because all of these things, the state has been given primacy from the feds. The state gives that primacy in effect to the county through the civil defense administrator. And in fact, the mayor is, in an emergency, the particular head of civil defense. That's the chain of command. Yes?
I'd like to go back to that earlier topic of how long a well can last, like the cost of infrastructure. Do we know, is there any way to estimate how long they can make a well operate here before they have to put in a new one?
Yeah, they're getting about 2 years out of it. They're supposed to, in their initial filing for their permit, they had claimed that they were going to get 5 to 7 years out of the well.
So the infrastructure costs, like the benefit, like the amount of power they get per well?
Well, see, the thing is that they're able to afford doing it because they have this contract that's basically paying them 20 cents a kilowatt hour, which is just call it inordinately high is a kindness. And I talked to one of the contractors, who was a real open, friendly guy. He was a well specialist, a geothermal well specialist, and he was here advising him on one of the wells they were drilling. And he told me that they brought in 108 containers to drill one well. I mean, you can do the math on just what the container costs are. You know, $6,000-7,000 a container now, something like that. Minus what's in it. So, yes.
Well, I just wanted to comment. I was at the Hawaii Export Nursery Conference yesterday, and Richard Hott spoke at lunch. For those who don't know, he's a big proponent of geothermal. And he talked about the resource basically by saying a geologist had told him we'll be over this hot spot for 500,000 years. So he made it seem like a very easily accessed and inexhaustible resource. And I thought, you know, for people that are trying to make up their mind about the subject, this information about the cost benefit and replacement type on a well might, you know, make them realize it's not such an easy resource as it's being portrayed.
Well, I mean, and that's exactly the kind of reason that we need to be better informed, because if you're not, geothermal is not on the hotspot. It's on the hotspot rift zone. And the only time that you are getting additional heat, i.e. lava, is based on an intrusion down the rift. Well, that intrusion down the rift can stop up there at Pu'u, or like in 1960, it can stop down at Cape Kumakahi. And everything in between is just kind of sort of toast. Right? I mean, that's, I don't know whether you saw the article in the Volcano Watch 2 Sundays ago, I believe it was, 2 or 3 Sundays ago. The scientists in charge, they were basically, as politely as he could, just said, you know, you're going to build something on the rift zone, you're nuts. I mean, it's the whole process is in and of itself at best insane, because You look at this map, okay? This map was made in 1980. You know what's missing on this map? Ulu, the second largest feature on the Kilauea River. It wasn't there in 1980. Pu'o was not there in 1980. Royal Gardens was still a place people lived in 1980, right? And the distance from there to PGV is 7 miles. For me, I live in Leilani. I know where I live. Everything I own's got wheels under it. I'm not kidding myself. It's a magic place. We all love it. That's why we're here. But I'm not stupid. So, the problem with magic is it's always terminus. It always has a terminus. And I will love it as long as I can. And when the day comes, like the guys in Kalapana, you bid it a fair fond aloha and you move on. But it was great while you had it. But to build the entire state's, this island's energy future, or the entire state's energy future on that, what's wrong with this picture?
Hey, John,
Yes.
I got one interesting question to ask.
Sure.
If the net benefit to geothermal is negative, then the will of the people, if they decide that they want to, can stop it. And there's a really simple and elegant way to do that, and it's called eminent domain. The power of the county to force the sale of the property is absolute. And an ordinance can be passed to sell bonds to buy that land out there where the geothermal is active right now. The people that own it would not have any choice. They have to sell it to the county, and the county can then shut it down and plant rice, whatever they want to do. The objective of achieving that is to convince the people that that's something that ought to happen. That process has started now with Laura Cutlass. She is undertaking a program of expanding an email database. The objective is to reach every voter on the island of Hawaii and send out weekly newsletters telling what the truth is about geothermal, and hold a referendum. And if the referendum passes, that becomes an ordinance that the mayor and the county council don't have any choice except to enforce. The cost to the taxpayers, if the geothermal people said they've got $200 million on the ground out there, a 30-year bond, as far as the taxes that it would cost the taxpayers, for amount about $25 a month. Chicken feed compared to the losses in real estate, the cost in disease and life that's being lost now if the geothermal proceeds. So I'll put that in your lap and ask you what your response to it.
Okay, well that kind of, you kind of have to move on, but that kind of segues me into how did we really get here, right? And let's talk about winners and losers. Okay, so who are the winners and who are the potential or actual losers in this? And how could this have possibly gotten this far, knowing what we know? That the odds that this place will be paved over in the next 50 years are almost 100%. Pretty much a given. You take the utility. HELCO is a wholly owned subsidiary of HEI, Hawaiian Electric Industries. For those of you who are not familiar with HEI, I'll paint you this little picture. There's the state capitol building. where the governor's office is. And over here on the east side is the health department. And over here is the LNR. And over here is the palace and the courts. And all of this area over here in downtown Honolulu, Gethro owns all those buildings. Go ahead, take a wild guess. I represented Sierra Club and Big Island Rainforest Action Network here on the energy issues for the last 22 years. And you go there to testify on legislation that has anything to do with HEI. And if there's 110 seats in the hearing room, HELCO's got 111 people in the room. They can do it easily. Keep that in mind. So, right now, their system, their money-making system is based on the fact that they are selling you a product for which they can collect 20% over cost. Whatever it costs. And no one controls those costs. They can take that and add 20% to it and send you the bill. And you can pay it, and we're sitting in the dark. They've taken a lot of flack from the environmental groups and now more and more from the community about the cost. And so now their tact is, okay, we're going to do alternate energy. But it's going to cost you more. Well, how do we, I'm over here on HELCO, HEI, how am I going to do that? Well, geez, we can get wind from, how far away can we get wind from, right? We'll build a cable. We build a cable, that's 20% over cost, forever. So we can go to Lanai or Molokai and we can put down $1 billion, $2, $3, $4, $5 billion cable. And they'll live on wind energy. Hey, we can lay one to the Big Island and they'll get geothermal. And that's even a better deal. The cable's longer. And because geothermal potentially can be overwhelmed, can be paved over, we can take all of those fossil fuel generators that we have and we can do what they call warm start maintenance. We're not going to shut them down. We're going to leave them sitting there in a condition that allows us to start them up in 72 hours. And guess who's going to pay for that? Go ahead, take a wild guess. The ratepayers. Right? So we have, though, it's a thing called stranded investment. They have no stranded investment. Every megawatt that they get out of PGV, they have a gas-fired, a fossil fuel-fired plant sitting on the side, waiting to ramp up in 72 hours. You know where the 72 hours comes from? The guys up at USGS, they said, we'll promise you 72 hours notice. Mm-hmm. I found that out when this whole mess got started back in, well, it was 90, after the blowout. Three of us went up to, called up the guy, Reggie Okamore. He was a scientist in charge. Really nice guy. Called him and said, Reggie, we got a bunch of questions. We need to find somebody who doesn't, not on the payroll here to answer these questions. He said, sure, come on up. Spent about 4 hours with us. We went through the list of questions. He debunked some of what was being said, verified some other things. And at the end of the day, we're leaving, and kind of slapped me on the back and says, you live way long, yeah? Yeah. Just kind of smiled at me and said, well, John, I promise you 72 hours. I said, thank you, Reggie. Appreciate it. So, that's the game. So, it's win, 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 win for them. And lose, lose, lose for us. Right? So, geothermal is great. And the other thing is,